I guess we'll just dive right in then. Um,
Sure.
so to start things off, I'm really curious to learn more about your journey as a writer, and how you sort of came to be published author, and how your background as an arts publicist has kind of influenced your work.
Sure, sure. Well, I have a very long and winding road in my life. I started out as a little kid wanting to be an actress, so that was my dream. But when I grew up and I started sort of sort of living that kind of life, I really decided that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do with my life, and I went into public relations and ultimately started my own business, which I've had for many, many years. And I handle arts organizations and classical music orchestras and that sort of thing. And earlier in the 2000s, just after the turn of this century, I was working on a writing project with a friend. We were doing like a blog of sort of a road diary. And I really enjoyed writing and I really wanted to continue writing. And I got this idea that I wanted to uh, uh, write a book for middle graders that would be very much in the feeling of the middle grade books that I read and I loved and I still read, over and over again. I had one book in particular that was about a little girl who I really related to, and she sort of learned to accept herself in this book, and I never forgot that. And and that book was a fantasy, like my book is, like Summer of Luck. So I started creating the story of Summer of Luck, which is spelled, the luck part of it is spelled L period, U period, C period, K period, because it stands for, I'll get into that a little bit later. But, and as a writer of nonfiction in my work, I have a basic sense of how to construct a sentence and that sort of thing. But I really didn't know anything about writing a novel. And like everything else in my life, I went to school for acting. I mean, that was what my degree is in. But everything else I've learned to do, including publicity and public relations, which is my career, I've learned it by doing, and the same for writing. I came up with, basically a first draft. I thought it was like the best thing ever in the, like, this is going to be a bestseller. And, no, that wasn't the case. The feedback that I got on it was, you need to keep working on this. And I did over and over again. And I continued to develop the story. I mean, that was one of the things that was really important in my journey as a writer, that, the first draft of this book is nothing like what you will see if you read Summer of Luck, which I hope people will do. I sort of reached out to people in the industry that I knew, like some agents and things, and there was this one agent who was a lovely guy, and he kind of believed in the book. He believed in the book enough to say to me, you need to work with the development editor. And he put me together with this man who was an angel. He helped me really he said, your book is like an outline, and you need to fill it out. You need to tell the story in a different way. What does this place look like? What's the background of the story? How does it, how did this camp, it takes place at a camp, how did the summer camp come to be? And so I rewrote it all, over and over again. And then, then I felt like I had something that was a little bit more of a real story. And why don't I just mention a little bit about what the story's about? right now. Summer of Luck is a middle, for middle grade kids, 8 to 12, and it's about three youngsters who find their way to self-acceptance with the help of a ghost who haunts a magical carnival. So that's the sort of basic story, and it's about these three kids who meet at summer camp, and they each have a problem communicating. Darby, who's 11, she stutters, and Naz, who's 10, has just moved to this country from Morocco with his mom. He speaks Arabic and French, but he's just learning English. And Justin, who's 12, his father had passed away right before the story starts, and he has stopped talking completely. So when they meet at summer camp, they hear this mysterious calliope music, like from a carousel. And they sneak over to this abandoned building next to camp, and they sneak inside, and it bursts into a magical carnival. And they meet Leroy Usher, Carnival King, which is what the LUCK stands for. And he is a ghost who had passed away a few years before, but he's come back to life in human form because his two sons and daughter are estranged, and he asks the three camp kids to help him with reconciling them. And in return, he says he will help them find their voices. And indeed, he does through all these magical carnival rides. So that's the gist of the book. And when I sort of, after I'd worked with the development editor, I had all these sort of side route scenes and things that again don't exist today, because ultimately, I started working, after I worked with the development editor, I really made the biggest step in my writing career, which is that I connected with other writers, and I got critique partners, and I got beta readers, and I got input from anybody who was willing to read the book. But really the best input came from other writers who knew what made a good story, who knew what the market was like, who knew what was selling. And I started reading contemporary middle grade. I had never done that before. I was still reading my books from when I was a kid, which I still do. That's fun too, but it was important to read what was selling and what people were writing in the present. And I found, to my delight, that there were a lot of books that I related to in the present day, and each time I pick up a new one that sounds like I might enjoy it, I find that too. So anyway, I kept revising. I just, there's some people who will start a book and put it aside. This isn't working, and they'll start something new. But this book had a hold on me. Summer of Luck had a hold on me, and I call it the book of my heart, because it really was just really important to me that this book saw the light of day. So yeah, that's sort of how I ultimately got into my writing journey, and I participated in all kinds of, every opportunity I could, online, to get a critique, or to get feedback, or to get mentoring, to get input, and that's how I kept making the book better and better and better. So ultimately, my journey took me to the doors of Intense Publishing, which is a small publisher. And last October, after I queried them, they wrote me back and said, we love this. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the years of rejections over and over and over, reject. I mean, so when I got this yes, it was like it is a dream come true to have this book published. And they also offered me a 2-book contract, because the book was intended as a series. And so I'm almost finished writing the sequel, but that we'll get to that. But that's my writing journey. It's a very unusual one. I don't know a lot of people who done it the way that I've done it. But I also, the more writers that I connect with and the more writers that I talk to, I find, there are some people who've done it like I've done it, and it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as
Exactly.
I do it. Yeah, as long as we all do it, and just keep going. So that's pretty much my writing journey.
So I'm curious to know, because you mentioned your background in drama, and I don't know if this would apply, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're developing these three characters of Darby, Justin, and Naz, did you think maybe that it was easier for you to kind of get inside their heads because you had a background in acting, and that's kind of part of that art as well?
I think that's a good possibility. I mean, I know for sure that when I would write, and I still do this to this day, when I'm trying to think of the words to write something, a gesture or an expression or just the way someone feels, I'll do it. Like the other night I said to my husband, "What do you call this?" you know, it really helps to kind of almost act it out. And I do see the characters visually. I see them in my head, and the way that I mean, I can't exactly remember. It's been too long to remember the process that I used when I wrote the first book, at the very beginning. But the sequel that I'm writing right now, I notice that what I do is I kind of imagine it, and I write it down almost like a screenplay. I write down, so and so says this and this happens and then they do this, like in the present tense. And then I have to go back and write the actual story, one chapter at a time. So it is very visual. I think absolutely having that acting background and imagining how something will look, like as if it were being played out, because when I read, I see that in my head. I see what's happening. So yeah, that's very helpful.
So again, talking about the three heroes, do you think that one of them reflects your own personality the most, or do you think each one of them reflects you just a little bit? Like how does your, I guess, like when your character creation, how does that process go for you?
I know that a lot of writers do a lot of preparation in writing, and they think of the character's favorite color and all. I've heard writers talk about that. That wasn't my experience. I created, I think Darby, the 11-year-old girl who stutters. I never stuttered, but there's a lot about her, her experience in her family that I relate to a lot. And especially the idea that when she feels like she can't just be who she is, that she, her stutter makes her inferior and less than, because that's how one of her family members treats her. And I just knew her. I didn't need to figure out what her favorite color was. And the two boys, I mean, Naz, who's the 10-year-old from Morocco, is just a hilarious. He's so funny. I don't even know where I got him from. He just, things he does just comes to me. He's enthusiastic about life. Of the three kids, his personality is very much like my real personality, or my personality today. Very optimistic, very enthusiastic, just kind of crazy about everything. He loves food. He loves American food. He loves hot dogs and Jell-O and stuff like that. I don't love Jell-O, but I mean, things like that. And Justin, the character whose father passed away, again, that is not my experience either. My parents are both alive today, and I have a wonderful relationship with them, and I'm really grateful to them for teaching me to read and to love literature. That's the best thing that I got from them. But I do have feelings of, not being listened to. Like, that's Justin's experience. It's why he, the grieving over his mother is devastated by the father's death and kind of shuts down, and he has no one to talk to and nobody listens to him. So that's why he just stops talking. And until he gets to camp and he meets these other kids, and he's sort of forced to have this communication with them telepathically, if you will, or magically. He doesn't want to have anything to do with anybody, and same for Darby as well. She wants to keep to herself, but the combination of these three kids together is what makes their ability to grow and become happier kids. And certainly my experience in connecting with other people, I relate to that very, very much. I was going to start to say about Justin, or I think I might have already said this, but that feeling of not being listened to, just it made me want to shut down and not say anything. I never had a problem talking, but I never felt comfortable, So yeah, there's parts of all three of them that I absolutely relate to and just adore. I love all three of them.
The thing you said about not being listened to, I feel like that, at least from my own experience as a kid, I feel like that is a very universal feeling when you're a kid, especially from adults not taking you seriously, not listening to you. That was one of the main themes that really stuck out to me, was this theme of communication, and how, these three kids who are struggling to find their voices, as you said, are able to form this bond with each other and communicate telepathically and otherwise. Why was that such an important theme for you to include in a kid's book, this theme of communication, and how you kind of weave that with the magic of the carnival?
That was the impetus for writing the book. I just wanted, if I had anything to say in a creative writing way, that's what it was. How does a kid learn to find their voice? I mean, that is the gist of it. And I also just, anything that just felt good to me about my childhood sort of, is in this book, and everything that didn't feel good to me about my childhood. Not everything maybe, but in this book, there's a scene where Darby is walking, excuse me, one of my alarms was going off. My phone alarm. There's a scene where Darby goes to the warehouse next camp for the first time. She goes there first without the two boys. That's part of the plot, is that she knew about this place last summer, and she went there and she almost got in, but she didn't. Their counselors found, called them, and they had to run away. So she was with her friend Monica, and Monica this summer at camp has a new good friend. And even though she's still friends with Darby, Darby hasn't had a lot of friends. And Monica, she was so looking forward to bunking with Monica. And Monica has this new friend that she's sharing a bunk with. And Darby feels just devastated. So she goes off to the warehouse by herself, and she's walking there, and she's thinking to herself, should I have done this alone? Should I have, Monica's sort of forgotten about this whole thing. And Darby's walking, she's hearing her mom admonish her from like the whistling of the trees. she's, her mom, you shouldn't be alone so much. That's the kind of experience that a lot of kids, of course, have, and how do you deal with that? What do you do when everything that you are is not right, is not considered right by someone else? That's kind of the struggle. And so kind of one of the benefits of working with other writers and a development editor that came out of this book is that and agent feedback that I had from agents who rejected this book. The original ending of the book, Darby gets to a place where she really isn't stuttering anymore, and that's sort of how she resolves her issue. Well, I was told, that isn't working at all, and so I had to, in one of my many rewrites of this book, I decided that she was going to stutter and she was going to learn to accept herself just as she was. And that was the biggest gift of writing this book, that came to me, not all that long ago in the scheme of this sort of 18-year writing journey that I've been on. Because then I got to write a scene where she has her mom and dad come to pick her up at camp, and she's all excited about everything that's happening, and she's stuttering while she's talking, but instead of cringing when her mother gives her a dark look, she doesn't even notice it. And writing that scene was extremely gratifying, because that's the idea of the book. I've learned to accept myself as I am, as an adult, and that's been my freedom. So I wanted to write a book where other kids had that experience too, and if kids who read it have that, the same experience that I had with this book that I was talking about when I was a kid, where I saw somebody accept themselves just like they were, what a gift. What a gift. So that's why the story of communication was so important to me. And communicating with people who can hear you, I mean, it's not like Darby's trying to change her mother. She never will. But she can find kids who are friends with her enough to be, to be there for her in ways that she needs.
I think that's a wonderful lesson. I feel like you can never hear that enough about self-love and self-acceptance. So I think that's just great that you included that in the book, and each of the heroes kind of gets to learn that lesson in a different way. So I feel like anybody who's reading this can connect to at least one of them, if not all three, in kind of a different way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's elements for boys and girls in this story, and even as a female, I mean, I relate to so much to Justin and his struggle. Like, he doesn't want to hang out with the guys in his cabin. There's this one kid who's kind of a cleanliness freak who adopts Justin and really likes him, and he wants to be friends, and Justin kind of pushes him off. But one night after going to the carnival, he finds out that Mr. Usher, the Leroy Usher, is asking the kids to do stuff that they haven't done, that they don't want to do, that they don't think they can do, that the plot advances every time they do something that they don't want to do, or that they think they can't do. So Justin, takes up this other kid's invitation to chat, and they start talking, and they, he thinks he's kind of a dork. Justin thinks the other kid's kind of a dork at first, but by the end of the book, they're really good friends. And, so it's also about doing things that you don't think you can do, but it's kind of walking through the fear and doing them anyway.
I don't know. Are you talking about Eugene? Because I
Yes.
loved Eugene so much. He was one of my favorite parts. Just the little interactions that him and Justin had about sunscreen or tofu. I thought he was hilarious. So
Thank
I
you.
loved, yeah, I loved every single time Eugene came into the story. I was like, yes. So I loved him. He was so adorable, and so is
Uh,
Justin. I think Justin. I agree. He's actually probably the one I also relate to the most. Although all three of them are just, you can't not root for them. So another element I wanted to talk to you about is setting, because it is so important, at least in my mind, in Summer of Luck, because you kind of have the summer camp, which is very nostalgic. And then you also have the carnival, which is kind of, they're both two very quintessential like childhood environments. So kind of how did you approach creating setting, and how these two different settings would kind of mirror each other or interlink, or how did you kind of go through that process?
I went to summer camp when I was about, I don't know, about around their ages, Darby's and Naz's and Justin's. And I sort of visually based my Camp Inch on that. But I also, the Parent Trap, the original, well, both of them, both of the Parent Trap movies, just my absolute favorites. And I've watched the Haley Mills version about 1,000 times. And I love, and Camp Inch, that's what Camp Inch is named after, is the camp in the first Parent Trap movie. And I love the idea of being at summer camp, just the idea of being away from home and being, um, all the fun stuff that you do, and horseback riding. I mean, I'm not a horseback rider at all. That's the only time I've ever ridden.
Hold on, I don't think I can hear you.
Sorry, I was getting a call. It's fun to just remember that time in my life. And so archery, riding canoes, all the things that the kids do. That was also one thing that my development editor encouraged me to do. He said, tell us more about what's happening at camp. I was so like I had this tunnel vision about telling the story, and nothing else was kind of going on. So I had to cut a lot of stuff, just taking a little bit of a diversion here. And I hope I don't even forget the question, but writing this book meant that I had so many scenes that didn't make it into the final. I had this tug of war that Naz's group did, gone. It didn't advance the story, So that was heartbreaking. But, okay, I'm sorry. I did forget the question. Where were
No,
we
you're
going?
told. We were talking about setting.
Oh,
I
setting.
wanted to
Okay.
say I thought it was funny because I also immediately imagined the Parent Trap camp when I read your book, because that movie, both of them, I've seen so many times that is also the camp I immediately imagined. So I think that's kind of funny because I did not know that, but just wanted to say that because that is 100% the movie that my mind went to.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to love in those old movies. And I pulled from just kind of from anything that really made me feel good. That was about the camp. And then as far as the carnival goes, I mean, I've never even really been to a carnival like the one in Luck, which is a kind of an old fashioned carnival with they have them on the corner in my city these days, or not these days, but before we were in the COVID period. But um, I mean, Disneyland is one of my favorite places to go. I live in Southern California, and I've gone, ever since I was a little kid. And even though the carnival is not at all like Disneyland in sight, but it is like it in the fun feeling, there you go and you have an awesome day and you eat cotton candy and you just have fun. And the setting of the carnival um, I just remember, like, in my mind when I was creating the carousel, I had I had so many elaborate descriptions that I had to cut of what things looked like, because they were too sophisticated for the readers. They were just not um, something that a middle grade kid would even be interested in. I had this for the carousel. I had how the 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 inner designs looked, and the only thing I let myself keep of that was how they looked like. The flowers looked so real. Darby thought they might even be growing. I mean, that was the gist of it. I was like, I had this, in my mind, this beautiful writing, all gone. um scenes on the cutting room floor. um so yeah, so it was just something that I just imagined going to and seeing. I remember it wasn't so much even Disneyland. There was this place in Southern California when I was a kid called POP. It was Pacific Ocean Park, and they had some of the kinds of rides that were at Luck. So I did some research and I looked. I mean, I didn't even I remembered a Hall of Mirrors at POP. That's where I got the Hall of Mirrors idea for Justin's adventure, where he gets to reconnect with his father. But I researched all those rides, and I found out what they were called and what they looked like, and some of the rides in the Luck Carnival are named after those. But Timeless Voyages, which is the main ride where the kids go on their adventures, where they learn all these things that they learn, that does not exist in reality. I mean, I made that up, and I guess it just came from my head. I mean, one of the things about being a writer that is so compelling to me, and what makes me sit down every night for a couple hours and spend all my free time doing it, is this ability to just sort of have this idea in my head, and all of a sudden I've written something and I look at it and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, I don't even know, but it's magic. It's magic. It's my version of real life magic, that I can just sort of think of some of these things, and that they end up on paper as a story. And that's what I love. I mean, I loved acting in that sort of way, that it made me feel like that when I was in college and a little bit afterwards, and in high school. That was how acting made me feel, like I was in something that was very magically creative. And I feel about my publicity work to a certain degree like that. When I can tell a story about a client that I believe in, to a media person, and I can get that media person to say, hey, that would make a really good TV news segment, or a newspaper article, or a web story, or whatever. And then they write it and they tell the story of my client, and it makes a difference for someone who sees it. That's the same kind of feeling. But but writing, I get to do it myself. I get to write whatever I want. I get to, I get to tell the story of Darby, Justin, and Naz, as I did in Summer of Luck. And Summer of Luck sequel is from the point of view of Justin, and he's starting to grow up a little more. And I'm not sure what's going to happen in the third book. That one's going to be back from Darby's point of view. I have no idea exactly, but I'm going to find out.
That's the fun part of writing, I guess, is you just get to imagine and figure it out.
Yeah.
So another thing is, family is a very strong through line in the book, whether it's the different families of Justin, Darby, and Naz, or the owners of the carnival, the ushers. And so one of the parts I also really enjoyed is that there's a lot of page time spent kind of exploring and healing this the relationship between the Usher siblings, the children of Leroy Usher. And so I wanted to ask you why you thought it was important to kind of include the journeys of these adult characters in a book for kids.
Again, my own experience is what prompted that. At the time I started this book, I had I suppose you could call it an estrangement over money with a family member, which is why the Usher siblings are estranged. They fought over money, and that's why their father comes back from the dead to, that's not going to sit with him. Family was all for him, his wife and his 3 kids. So yeah, and the idea of fighting over money was abhorrent to me, but it happened. And what do you do about that? You try to work it out, and I did ultimately work it out, and it's all healed and everything, but it was a very painful time, and I was able to relate to the 3 of them as the magic of they don't know that their father's come back from the dead, but he communicates sort of through the kids at first, and then in the very end, they kind of have these little moments where they know he's been there, and that he's had a hand in all of this, and that's what makes them make their decision at the end of the book to combine the carnival with the camp, because they knew that's what their father wanted. But as I'm talking about this, I'm realizing that one of the things that happened from point A, first draft, through my process of writing is that the characters who were maybe the kids weren't this. I don't think the kids were kind of caricatures, but the adults started out that way. The older Usher brother, Jeff, he has a wife who is only sort of momentarily mentioned, but she was the caricature. She was driving his greed. She wanted him to buy this whole subplot thing that, again, cutting room floor. But I ultimately realized that Jeff had to be more human. He had to have a reason that he was able to, obviously everybody wants to make money, and that's what he wanted, but he also realized that there was more to making money than taking the biggest offer on the property, and that his father, that's not what his father would have wanted, because the lessons his father taught him growing up had stuck enough so that he knew about what he had to do was the right thing. And yeah, so I think he was kind of the biggest caricature originally, and I really started to love him, and one of my favorite scenes in the book is the moment where he goes into the office and is, you probably remember the scene where he gets a message from his father on the typewriter, and that was, I get all teary-eyed when I'm very affected by my own book. I hope I'm not being self-centered, but I wrote a book that was the kind of book I love to read, that makes me tear up at the end, and a happy ending is really important. And I think it's important for this kind of book. There's all kinds of books. This kind of book, this kind of coming of age book, I think is important, where there's a happy end.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of adult characters in kids' books can be kind of distant sometimes, or caricature-like. And you really do an amazing job of humanizing the 3 Usher siblings to the point that you care about them as much as you care about Justin, Darby, and Naz. And I loved, especially one of the moments I loved is when Darby and Kate, is it Kate or Katie?
Yeah.
When they kind of have a couple moments together, and Kate teaches Darby the little like motto, I guess, that her father taught her.
Right.
I loved that. I thought that was such a, like, I loved seeing that connection between, especially an adult character and a kid. I don't know. I found that very, very touching, and how their kind of journeys intersected with each other. So I very much enjoyed that.
Thank you. Yeah, the the thing that, another kind of, just let me insert this here from a craft point of view. I wrote that book where everybody's point of view would happen like within a page. You know, I didn't know anything about how to construct points of view. Again, that was something I learned from other writers. And that was also why there was also some scenes between Naz's counselors, Rich, the whistle freak, and Woody, you know, the more laid back surfer type dude. And there was a lot of conflict between the two of them that it had no place in this story because it was an adult story. It was adult to adult. And the only interaction that I really found that I was able to keep was the interaction where it involved the kids, one way or the other. And yes, there's still scenes with the Usher siblings without the kids, but it's all interwoven with things that have to do with the kids. And the fact that Woody and Rich weren't getting along is really pretty irrelevant because, you know, one was laid back and one was really strict. I mean, I was able to weave a little bit of that into the story, where the one scene where you know, Woody and Naz are speaking French together, and Naz's mom has asked the camp to help him just, you know, speak English and learn English. But Rich, the whistleblower counselor, I mean, he's not a whistleblower, but he's a very sort of almost military whistle blowing counselor. He you know, he's very angry that they're speaking French, and he tells Woody not to speak French with Naz, and we don't really know why until later. But you know, I was able to keep things like that in when it involved the kids, and that was fun to do. I loved doing that. I loved I mean, I really miss some of the scenes that don't exist anymore, but I got to keep a lot of things by adopting them or adapting them so that the kids were somehow involved.
So that kind of segues into one of my last questions, which is, obviously there's going to be a sequel to Summer of Luck. So one, what can you tell us about that? But were you also able to maybe use some of those cut scenes from earlier drafts? Were you able to use those maybe in the sequel, or was it kind of just starting fresh? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, like everything else with this book, I started the sequel years ago, and then a couple summers ago, I started reworking it. And then last summer, before I sold this book, that one of my critique partners and I decided to, and I want to give her a shout. She's an awesome person. She's one of the reasons this book is where it is today. She's like the main reason. Where was I going? Oh yeah, so last summer, she and I decided in August we were going to write, and we were going to each write 5,000 to 10,000 words. We were going to start writing again because I'd been working on revising Summer of Luck, but I hadn't written anything new, and we decided to do that. So I started to write, you know, and the only thing that I was able to keep in the new book out of the old new book, not out of Summer of Luck, but out of the sequel that I had started writing, was that Naz breaks his arm and he's late coming to camp. And that was it. Everything else gone. But what Summer of Luck, and it's called Summer of Luck, Ready or Not. Ready or Not is really the title of the book. And it's about, it's from the point of view just of Justin. And we come back to camp for the second summer, and camp has gotten a little bigger because the camp director had wanted to expand the camp. There's a big demand for more kids. And the whole carnival is part of the camp now. So when you go to camp, you get to go on the carnival rides. They've built new carnival rides. They did a whole sort of renovation of the warehouse. And Timeless Voyages is gone, not there. And it's Justin's story of dealing with a bully in his cabin and learning how to be able to stand up against unfairness. And that's kind of the gist of the story. But they do, you know, and he comes to camp. Justin comes to camp expecting Mr. Usher to just fix everything for him. Like he sort of feels like Mr. Usher did last year. And of course, Justin, you know, has to be reminded by Darby this summer, the second summer, that Mr. Usher didn't do anything for the kids. He just showed them what he wanted them to see. And they did all the growing and the growing up and the taking the chances that they took by doing things they didn't think they could do. And the two adventures that I've written so far, where they go back to the carnival, or, you know, to Mr. Usher summers them for a midnight adventure. One of them, I'm not going to give anything away, but Timeless Voyages has a role in one of those. Timeless Voyages makes a return appearance in one of the scenes, and through all these things, like in the first book, Justin learns he doesn't get told how to get over his fear of standing up to a bully. That he did that once and he got hit. You know, the bully beat him up, and he doesn't, not at camp, but this happened before camp, and so he's struggling with that. How do you do that? You know, he keeps waiting for Mr. Usher to show up and show him how to do this, and that's the story of book 2.
So was it your experience, because I've sometimes heard authors talk about, you know, how writing your second book can be much harder than writing your first book for some reason. Was that your experience, or was it easier than writing the first Summer of Luck?
Because I wrote Summer of Luck over a period of, like I said, 18 years, and not with any consistency, really. But this book I started in August, like I said, and I wrote very casually until I got my contract with my publisher, Intense Publications, who I'm forever grateful to them for believing in this book like the way that I do. You know, I have a deadline. My deadline's in a couple of months. I got to have this book done. So it's really different. It's really different writing this book. And it's a lot of believing in myself, you know, over and over again, because you could ask my husband, I'll call him in here and he can tell you. I will write something, you know, I'll write my chapter like I told you that I do. I just wrote, this happens and this happens, and, you know, and then blah, blah, blah. And then I'll be like, oh my God, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. How do you do this? I am I am clearly not a writer. I suck, you know. And so what I do, and he just kind of goes, "You can do it. I believe in you." He's awesome. You know? And I just do something else. You know, I go back and read another part of the book and do some revising. And I don't get stuck in it. And it's happened enough now. I just literally finished, I have 12 chapters written of Ready or Not. And I just the other night finished chapter 12. And I write, if I can't figure something out or how I want it to read, I just put it in yellow. You know, I highlight it in yellow. So I know, you know, a chapter full of yellow becomes less yellow and less yellow. And all of a sudden there's no yellow anymore. And the process of doing that over and over again has given me the confidence to know that, you know, yeah, I'm going to say it every time. Oh, maybe I can't write, but I know I can. I mean, I have proof that I can, you know. And so I would say I'm glad I have this deadline, because otherwise I don't want it to take another 20 years to write my second book, you know. So yeah, I'm excited about finishing this book and seeing what comes up in Darby's life for book 3.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to end. I don't have any other questions for you, but is there anything else that you'd like to share before we end here?
I always like to just share the fact that my journey as a writer, because it took so long, because I faced rejection, I really didn't talk about my years of rejection, you know, and all there's a word in Summer of Luck that I had Mr. Usher call Darby at the very beginning, and he calls her intrepid. It means oh my God, I can't remember the exact definition, but it means determined. That's the definition. She looks it up, and she sees that there's one definition that's like fearless or something. She knows she's not fearless, but she thinks she could be determined. And she finds out at the end of the book she really is intrepid. And I like that word so much. I heard somebody use that word when I was a kid, and I never forgot it. And I believe that every writer is that, you know, and every writer, and I had to continue to believe in myself over and over again. And I wrote up a list of one affirmation a day that I could look at to remind myself that this can happen to me, that I got to keep going, you know, that I am intrepid, that I am whatever. I mean, there's 30 different things and they're all applicable to me, but I think every writer could benefit by you know, giving themselves that kind of feedback and support and connecting with other writers for not only for writing, you know, for writing craft input, but just the journey, you know, just hear other people having their rejections and having their success. You know, I would see these writers, I got an agent, I got a publisher, my book's coming out, whatever. And, you know, I just had to keep believing that could happen to me too. And it did.
Well, congratulations. I'm very excited for everybody to read this book. And thank you so much for allowing me and Pine Reads to kind of meet Darby, Justin, and Naz before they make their official debut. And September so to everyone, 15th. yeah, on September 15th, that's when Summer of Luck is coming out. And I will put links in the description and how to order Summer of Luck. And also I'll put links to your social media and your website as well. And they just thank you so much again for taking time out of your schedule to do this.
Thank you, Hannah. It's been great talking to you. I've really enjoyed it.